Okay, hey, good morning, everybody. This is Ryan Kurlinski from the Department of Market Monitoring. I'll be presenting today on our recently published Q3 2023 report on market issues and performance. Let's see, sorry, not on camera right now. I had a little bit of technical difficulties with the speaker line, but luckily we're getting started here close to on time, so I'm grateful for that. So this report, quarterly report, was the work of a whole lot of dedicated and talented analysts in DMM, and I just get to present it here. I want to give a shout out to the analysts in DMM who did this report. Let's see. So one last thing, I think this meeting is being recorded. But so I think that's for people's convenience. If you were going to quote anything I say today, please do reach out to me first in case I misspeak. Also, throughout this hour here, there's a lot of material, so I doubt I'll be able to get through all of it. But I will stop for questions. I'm stopping for questions at a few different kind of natural breaking points throughout the presentation. So please feel free to to ask questions in the chat, or or wait until I get to a spot to ask questions. You can ask questions from the previous slides. So with that, we'll get going. So gas prices, as you can see at this graph, we're showing gas prices at the major hubs, the Henry Hub, the major national hub, and major hubs throughout the West here. Gas prices for Q3 2023, you can see were up slightly compared to the previous quarter, Q2 2023, but down significantly from the same quarter of last year, Q3 2022. Right, Henry Hub prices and Sumas and Northwest Sumas and El Paso Permian gas prices were down over 60%, and the CAISO hubs, the gas hubs in CAISO, were down over 40% compared to the same quarter last year. And this is obviously significant for electricity market prices.
Ryan, this is
because
Kyle. We still see the starting slide.
Oh, okay.
The title slide.
Thank you for interrupting. Let's see if does this change the slide? Yeah, it's moving on my end here.
Give me one moment. I'm gonna see if I can help fix.
Okay.
Try it now.
Okay. Are you seeing the gas prices slide now?
We are now. Thank you.
All right. Excellent. All right. So I can just repeat the main point there pretty quickly, which is that gas prices at the major hubs around the West are down significantly in Q3 2023 compared to the same quarter of 2022. Okay, did that advance the slide as well? Are we seeing the electricity prices slide?
We are. It's working fine now.
All right, great. Thanks, Kyle. All right. So electricity prices, I mean, one of these years, this fact will change, but we continue to see electricity prices being strongly correlated with gas prices. So here we're looking at the load-weighted average CAISO electricity prices in the day, 15-minute, and 5-minute market in CAISO, and that's on the left axis. The right axis has the same SoCal City gas price you saw from the last slide. And with gas prices decreasing significantly from the same quarter last year, we do see the average electricity prices in CAISO decreasing from an average of about $100 per megawatt hour in Q3 of 2022 down to an average of about $56 per megawatt hour in Q3 of 2023. This is an hourly breakdown of those same load-weighted average CAISO system prices for Q3 2023. Okay. And so we can see here that the blue, yellow, and green lines are again those hourly CAISO electricity prices. The red dotted line is the average net load. This graph shows the shape of the CAISO electricity prices generally following the average net shape, with peaks during the morning hours, and also the larger peak in the evening peak net load hours. Something to notice here is that we see as expected, we see the day-ahead market price pretty closely following the 15-minute market price, which we would expect due to convergence bids in the day-ahead market, converging day-ahead market prices, 15-minute market prices. But we do see over those peak net load hours during the evening ramp, you see that 15-minute market price significantly higher than the 5-minute market price. And that's due to a couple of things that I plan to kind of focus on in a few slides from now throughout this kind of second half of this talk. That's the price difference between the 15-minute market price and the 5-minute market price is caused largely by differences in operator actions, CAISO BA operator actions. So operators will increase the load adjustment used in the 15-minute market over these net load peak hours at a higher value than operators increase the load used in the 5-minute market. That's one issue we'll talk about later on in this talk. And then in Q3 2023, from July 26th through the end of the quarter into November 16th, CAISO balancing area operators also limited WEIN transfers into the CAISO balancing area in the hourly market and the 15-minute market, but then they did not limit those transfers to the 5-minute market. So both of those significant operator actions contribute to this big price difference we see over those peak net load hours. So we'll get to those. We'll get to an explanation of those in a few slides. This slide showing the average monthly renewable generation for generators in the CAISO balancing area. For Q3 2023, we have hydro up over 60% from hydro in the same quarter of the previous year. We see solar's up 11%, wind's up 8%. Those are the three largest sources of renewable generation in CAISO, and that contributes to the average hourly renewable generation in Q3 2023 being up over 2,000 megawatts more than in the same quarter of 2022. So this slide shows the change in the average hourly generation by fuel type from Q3 2022 to Q3 2023 for generation in the CAISO balancing area. So aside from the increase in hydro and solar and wind that we talked about on the last slide. We also see battery discharge is up 34% this in Q3 2023 compared to the same quarter the previous year. But those increases in generation are more than offset by decreases in net imports. Right? Net imports are down 24% compared to the same quarter in 2022. And it's also offset by decreases in natural gas production. Natural gas production is down 7%. And let's see, there can be a net decrease in this generation due to load being lower in Q3 2023 compared to 2022 when CAISO had those prolonged heat waves in late August and September of 2022. Okay, yeah, so this is actually a decent spot here to stop and take some questions before I move on to talking about issues that impact more of the rest of the West. So please let me know if you have any questions before I keep going.
We currently do not have any questions in the queue.
Okay, then I'll keep going. So aside from gas prices that we saw, it's kind of driving electricity prices around the West. Other factors kind of impacting the electricity markets, significantly impacting electricity markets in this quarter were atypical hydroelectric and weather conditions that shifted supply and demand. So the hydroelectric availability was relatively high in California. It was relatively low in the Northwest, and we had sustained high temperatures in the Southwest. So typically over the summer, you'll see flows during peak hours from the Northwest to the system. But over the summer of 2023, due to these conditions, kind of the more stressed conditions in the Northwest and Southwest, we had lower system to California flows. And in fact, as we'll see during a lot of hours on average, actually the power is flowing from California to the rest of the system. So this trend can be seen in this graph, which is showing the comparing the day-ahead CAISO and bilateral market prices. The solid blue and yellow line are the peak bilateral prices as displayed as provided by the Intercontinental Exchange for day-ahead. The dotted lines are the equivalent day-ahead prices for the major DLAPs in the CAISO area, PG&E and SCE, for again the peak hours, hour 7 to 22 during non-Sundays, non-holidays. And so I think what we see here is especially in July and August of 2023, the bilateral electricity market prices are significantly higher there at Mid-C and Palo Verde than in the CAISO. And those prices can start to converge in September of 2023. Again, the point being kind of the conditions in the rest of the West outside of CAISO were more stressed over the summer than in CAISO. All right, so this graph is a pretty busy graph. So let's focus on this. This also does help to show the trends I just discussed about lower flows from the system to CAISO. So let's focus on the very right part of this graph. to talk about what this graph shows. This shows data, the right part of the graph shows data from Q3 2023, shows the average CAISO hourly net interchange for that quarter. The dark blue line above zero shows imports into CAISO over the intertie constraints, right, the ITCs, the major ITCs, right, such as like Malin, NAB, Palo Verde, Mead. So those are the day-ahead imports. The dark yellow line above zero shows the imports in the 15-minute market. So we see that there's, right, incremental imports in the 15-minute market relative to the day-ahead for some of these hours. The light blue line below zero shows the average hourly exports over those out of the CAISO scheduling points in the day-ahead market. The light yellow line shows the final 15-minute market exports over those scheduling points for each hour. So now when we get to the dotted black line, that is the net of the 15-minute market imports and exports for each hour. So what we can see here is that, so for instance, the CAISO balancing area was a net exporter over the intertie constraints from about hour ending 12 to 18. The gray line then adds in WEIM transfers. So when the gray line is below the black dotted line, that's showing that there's WEIM transfers out of the CAISO balancing area. So for instance, hour ending 14, or about 2,300 megawatts of WEIM transfers out of the CAISO balancing area. A main takeaway to get from this graph is the trend of year-over-year lower net imports into the CAISO balancing area. So if you compare the black Q3 2023 to the same quarter from 2022, which is right next to it, you see that for each hour, each comparable hour, the net imports into CAISO decrease by more than 2,000 megawatts. And that also holds true for WEIM. When you look at net imports into CAISO, including WEIM transfers. So this, this is a significant shift in terms of reduced net import to the CAISO balancing area. And if you look at the kind of the year-over-year comparison of from previous quarters to the same quarter from the year before, this is kind of a long-term trend in the CAISO balancing area of reduced net imports into the CAISO BA. It looks like since we do, I can see if my first question, so I'll stop here and take a question since we didn't have any earlier.
We do have one hand raised. Okay. We have one hand raised. Give me one moment. Yep. Please go ahead.
Hi, Ryan. This is Robert Fisher with NV Energy. Can you confirm you can hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. Thank you very much for this graph. I have a question in regards to, so these are cleared schedules. Do we know if the offers decrease, the quantity of offers, or is this just a matter of price not clearing the quantity amounts, if that makes sense?
Are you saying you're asking, is this potentially, you think this could potentially be just, there could still be the same amount of imports bid in, but just at a higher price that they don't clear?
Yes, that's in general my question.
Okay.
Is it due to the decrease in imports being bid in, or is there like a consistent level of imports bid in, they just clear at a different point?
That's a fair question. Okay, I'll note that. I don't have that. I don't have a good answer for that right in front of me at this time.
Okay.
I'll note that and get back to you. Yeah, no, thanks for that question. All right, I'll go on to the next slide. Okay, yeah, so now I'm going to start getting into CAISO balancing area operator actions. Those, the operator actions, I kind of previewed them earlier. Those obviously impact the CAISO balancing area, but they also can have a significant impact and did have an impact on other balancing areas across the WIM. So first we'll start off looking at, this graph is showing the average hourly load adjustments in the real-time markets, so the hour-ahead market, 15-minute market, 5-minute market for Q3 2022, which would be the dotted lines. The solid lines show those average hourly load adjustments for Q3 2023. So the operators can, in each of the real-time markets, operators can adjust the load forecast that the market uses. And so, for instance, in the hour-ahead market, and 15-minute market, that's largely done in order to try to address uncertainty that might materialize between the start of the market run and the actual power flow. And so we noticed that in the hour and 15-minute market, there's a significant adjustment to the load forecast. On average, it gets up to 2,000 megawatts there in hour ending 19 for Q3, and those load adjustments are intended, again, to address uncertainty, but specifically to address uncertainty. The ideal would be to procure and schedule more hourly block imports into the CAISO balancing area, or to commit more units in the CAISO balancing area, or ramp up resources to a faster ramp rate, so they're able to address uncertainty that may materialize between the start of the market run and the time of power flow. But also to potentially reduce economic exports that are bid economically into the CAISO balancing area. And then ultimately, if there's not enough supply to meet load and self-scheduled exports, one of the purposes of this hour market load adjustment is to potentially, in these kind of really tight conditions, to reduce self-scheduled exports that self-scheduled as hour block exports in the hour-ahead market. So we see in this graph that the load adjustments in the hour-ahead market and the 15-minute market in 2023 were less, or we're a decent amount lower on average than the load adjustments in those markets for the same quarter of 2022. And in fact, in past quarters, the shape of the load adjustment hour and 15-minute market, there was a more noticeable average adjustment up during the morning hours. You can see here 2022. But the typical pattern of operators from Q3 2023 was such that really in the hour and 15-minute market, there's really only an average adjustment in the over those evening peak net load hours. Again, also point out here the significant difference between the load adjustment in the hour and 15-minute market over the peak net load hours relative to the average hourly load adjustment over those same hours in the 5-minute market, and that does contribute to the higher prices in the 15-minute market than in the 5-minute market that I talked about a few slides ago. All right, so this shows kind of an average, a decrease in the load adjustment in the hour market and 5-minute market. But that's not really the whole story. So this is a different look at load adjustments. So this is showing the hour market load adjustments. So average daily hour market load adjustments for hours ending 17 to 21. Right, so it's the hour market load adjustments for those peak hours. It's comparing 2022, which is shown in the red line, to those hour market peak hour adjustments for 2023, which are the blue blocks, blue bars. So we can see from this that the operators did seem to have kind of a different pattern in terms of in terms of having a lower hour at market load adjustment than they had in the previous year in 2023, starting in late May, and that continued through into kind of late July, the kind of last third of July. And so what this graph is showing is it kind of points out that while the kind of the typical pattern for operators in 2023 for that hour at market load adjustment seemed to be lower, once we got to July 20th, that pattern changed. So we see here is July 18th, 19th, 20th. This is kind of this white period here in the second, and kind of last third of July. During that period, operators, the kind of average adjustment was 800 to 700 megawatts of load adjustment. But then after July 20th, the operator's pattern then seemed to increase back up to more to what the kind of the load adjustment was in hour market for 2022. So another point here is that kind of average decrease we saw in the last graph over those peak net load hours, while it was an average decrease, a lot of that was from kind of the first 2/3 of July, and then also in the kind of the last part of August, early part of September, when in 2022, right, there was a very large amount of operator adjustment due to those kind of extreme load scenarios that were happening in August and September 2022. So let's look a little closer here at what happened on July 20th. So this graph shows real-time market supply bids and demand requirements for July 20th, 2023. The green bars show resource adequacy bids. The light blue bars show bids from resources that have RA capacity, but it's bids over the RA capacity. So the best example are solar and wind, which will very often produce more energy than they get RA capacity credit for. And the light gray bars above that shows bids from resources that have no RA capacity. The black line is the 5-minute load forecast, kind of the load requirement plus the ancillary service requirement in the CAISO balancing area. And then the red line takes that same load and ancillary service requirement and adds onto it self-scheduled exports over the ITCs out of the CAISO balancing area. So on July 20th, we see here that the CAISO balancing area has sufficient supply from resource adequacy and certainly from resource adequacy resources to meet their load and ancillary service requirements. But when add on over in the hour ahead market, the hour ahead market cleared more than 8,000 megawatts of self-scheduled exports, or gave those exports schedules. So due to uncertainty materializing really rapidly after the start of an hour at market run in hour ending 20, so increased load, decreased supply. In hour ending 20, once we got to the 5-minute market, essentially power flow, there was almost not enough supply, even including all capacity from non-RA resources. There was almost not enough total capacity to meet the load and ancillary service requirements plus those self-scheduled exports. So the CAISO balancing area for hour ending 20 declared a level 1 energy emergency alert. Keep going here. See, we have another question or two, but I'll get to that in a second. So, kind of make the point from these last few graphs here, because this is a more detailed look at the CAISO balancing area operator load adjustments for every interval in the hour-ahead market, 15-minute market, and 5-minute market. For July 20th, this load bias up until hour 21 was kind of typical of operator load bias for earlier in July and June, at relatively low load bias in hour and 15-minute market, but uncertainty materialized there during hour and 20. And so from that point forward, operators did begin to increase that load adjustment that they used in the hour and 15-minute market. So by the time you got to July 25th, which was the next really kind of tight day for the CAISO balancing area, where the CAISO balancing area did end up declaring an energy emergency alert watch, EA watch. Right, operators were then adjusting the load up, getting up to 4,000 to 5,000 megawatts during those peak net load hours. And so I just want to kind of reiterate the point that, the point that one of the goals of this load adjustment, the load bias, is to try to address uncertainty, try to address the uncertainty that did materialize pretty quickly in hour 20 on July 20th. Right, and so the goal is to try to get more hourly block imports, to try to ramp up more internal resources, and then or to reduce economic exports, and if necessary, to not give hour-ahead market schedules to self-scheduled exports, such as to potentially reduce this large amount of self-scheduled exports that cleared in hour 20 on July 20th. So let me go one more slide here. We'll take some questions. So what we did see is that with the increase in those load adjustments during the peak hours after you got past July 20th, that did have an impact on exports in the real-time market. Right, so this graph shows the self-scheduled exports in during the July and August high load periods that tried to self-schedule out of the CAISO balancing area, but did not receive awards. This breaks it down into the blue, which is the low priority real-time exports. So those are exports that did not have residual unit commitment awards. We would expect those to be the first self-scheduled exports to not receive hour and market awards. And then in green are the low priority, the LPT exports that did receive residual unit commitment awards. So we see on July 25th and July 26th, especially hour 20, significant amount of self-scheduled exports that did not receive hour and market awards during kind of the tightest periods during August, the 14th to 16th. So, we still see significant quantity in some of these hours, over 1,000 megawatts there on August 16th, hour 19 and 20 of the real-time low priority exports that did not receive hour and market awards. So with that, that's a good time to stop and take some questions.
Okay, we have some questions in the queue. First caller, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, great. This is Alva Svoboda from PG&E. I have to say, the way you're constructing this story of the year is really fantastic. It makes a lot of things jump out. Obviously, in these periods that we're talking about, the knowing that the Southwest had a need for energy that you sort of represent on an aggregate basis is part of this. But what I'm curious about is, and you may just have to repeat yourself, but are there any limiters on these self-scheduled exports other than, were you suggesting the operators could have taken unilateral action? And if there are, what limiters there are now, and also just curious as to what limiters you think are coming into place over, say, the next year?
No, that's a really good question. And that is, that's maybe that is something maybe talk about more and I get into what the operators did next, starting on July 26th, which I'll get into the next few slides. But no, I mean the CAISO balancing area outside of the individual ITC limits on export ITC limits on individual intertie constraints. I think that currently is most of what could limit the exports out. There's not an aggregate limit on exports out. But that is, and as I talk about with the operators, with the other kind of major operator action that CAISO operators took, that could be something to consider as an alternative. So no, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, you suggest getting a better aggregate view earlier on rather than just simply relying on the ITC limits in this kind of case.
Right. I mean, because my understanding is that there's the ITC limits, and then the operators are utilizing the load adjustment in the hour market, right, to in really emergency situations to prevent too many exports from receiving schedules. So yeah, something to consider. I've not thought through this all the way, but but in the context of what the operators also did, limiting the WM transfers into CAISO, there may be some alternatives to consider, and one of those might be to consider kind of an aggregate limit on net exports out. But I'm sure there's other issues with that as well. So that's not a recommendation, but
no, yeah, and we look forward to more considered recommendations from DMM on this in this very important area. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks, Alva. It's like JK has her hand raised.
Please go ahead.
I have a question about the previous slides that you showed the low bias of the 15 minute and a half. Yes, that's the slide. So I'm trying to understand the function of the load bias in both 15-minute and the HASP. The next slide you show is perhaps mainly the low bias reduce the self-scheduled exports being clear. Now, is the load bias in the 15-minute had the same functionality that making the WEIM transfers, exports clear the less, or it has a different role?
So I haven't had a necessarily a really clear discussion with the CAISO on exactly why and how they set these the various load adjustments in the hour and 15-minute market. But I would say that there is, and I think it is pretty clear that for the hour end market, right, the explanation I gave that the reason for using the load adjustment in the hour end market is to bring in hourly block imports, potentially reduce exports. But there's from my perspective, there's a very good justification for trying to make the 15-minute market load bias be very similar to the hour end market load bias. And that goes back to kind of the start of the 15-minute market for quarter 764, which is that if you don't want major discrepancies between prices in the 15-minute market and the hour-end market. That could create a lot of financial issues for hourly block imports and exports. So that's my hypothesis, is that operators are trying to make the 15-minute market load bias be similar to the hour market load bias, but that's just a hypothesis for me.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Yep. All right, let me get going here. See if I can get through this next part. Okay, so again, the narrative about the operator adjustments in the hour and 15-minute market also helps to explain the probably maybe more significant action or another significant action that the CAISO balancing area operators took in the summer of 2023, which was to limit the dynamic transfers into the CAISO balancing area. So these are dynamic WIM transfers into the CAISO balancing area, to limit them in the 15-minute market, but not in the 5-minute market. This graph shows WEM transfers into CAISO. The blue bars are the hour-ahead market dynamic transfers into the CAISO balancing area. The red bars are the 5-minute market dynamic transfers into the CAISO balancing area. So the transfers, the hour-ahead market load adjustments that I described, like I said, with the kind of the intention for those would be to increase hourly block imports and potentially reduce export. But those hour-ahead market load adjustments could also be met by WEM transfers into the CAISO balancing area. So another way of thinking about that is, WEM transfers into the CAISO balancing area in the hour-ahead market could potentially be used to support exports over ITCs out of CAISO that ultimately might not be able to be met if those WIM transfers, those advisory WIM transfers into the CAISO balancing area in the hourly market don't show up. So let's look here on July 25th, hourly 19. I think this is a serious concern that the CAISO balancing area had, which is that, right, we know from this day that during this hour, the CAISO balancing area did a significant load adjustment up in the hourly market. We see a significant portion of WIM transfers into the CAISO balancing area over this hour, right, in the hour-end market. But then we don't see those red bars for a lot of this hour. So what this raised the concern that these hour-end market load adjustment, right, again, attended to in emergency situations, very tight situations, potentially to not give awards to exports out of CAISO. If they're being met by WIM transfers into CAISO in the hour-end market, but then those transfers don't show up in the 5-minute market, that could create a reliability issue, not just CAISO balancing area, right? Because like we kind of saw on July 20th in that graph showing supply and demand, if there's not sufficient supply ultimately when you get to the 5-minute market to meet CAISO load and service plus exports who's already received hour market awards, then the CAISO balancing area is going to have to cut exports or load. And I think they are obligated by the tariff to reduce low priority exports load. So the action that CAISO balancing area took, this is a main concern. We can see here at this black line starting on July 26th, hour 20, they did not allow any dynamic transfers, any WIM dynamic transfers into the CAISO balancing area in the hour-ahead market or the 15-minute market. So we see no blue bars, no hour-ahead dynamic transfers into CAISO when we see this black line representing the limit being implemented. But we see WIM transfers into CAISO in the 5-minute market. That's the red bars here. So this was an action they took in an hour and 15-minute market to limit WIM transfers into CAISO, but it was not taken in the those limitations to the transfers were not put into the 5-minute market. And this was done starting for hour 20 on July 26th, and it was done for the peak, these peak net load evening hours. So, and only for those kind of peak net load evening hours from July 26th through November 16th. Okay, I'm going to finish going through this, and then we'll get to some questions here. So, this graph shows the average hour-ahead CAISO supply and demand in the interval before and after the limitation. So this is taking, so the top two bars here are showing the supply and demand in an hour-ahead market, in the hour-ahead market interval for one interval for each of it's about 9 days, kind of the peak days in July, mid-August, and late August. So what we're seeing here, these top two bars again show the supply and the demand in an average over these kind of over one interval for each of these 9 days. So we see for the interval prior to the WIM import limitation. So for instance, the interval, this would be, right, for instance, the interval in the interval at the end of hour 19, right before the limitations put in hour 20. right? That's what these top bars show, kind of the average supply and demand in that interval over the 9 peak days. We see that there's WEM imports into CAISO over 1,800 megawatts. The bottom 2 bars show supply and demand over for the interval in each of those 9 days right after CAISO balancing areas implemented that WM transfer limitation into CAISO. So we see that this data indicates that the transfer limitation into CAISO had the intended effect on these peak days. So instead of having the 1,800 megawatts of WM transfers into CAISO, right, are no longer there in the interval after that limitation is implemented, and so it's displaced by about 400 megawatts of additional imports over the ITCs into CAISO, and a reduction of 800 megawatts of exports down to 7,600 megawatts of exports out of CAISO. So yeah, literally what this is showing is that this limitation on these tight days did have the intended effect of reducing advisory WM imports into CAISO and replacing them with increased hourly block imports and decreased exports out of CAISO. So while the limitation had kind of the intended reliability impact, it also significantly impacted the rest of the West, rest of WIM. So this shows transfers into APS and out of APS on these kind of same tight days in July. So before, on these days on July 20th, July 25th, before the limitation on transfers into CAISO was implemented, we see significant transfers from Arizona out to CAISO. Those are the blue bars. We also see some transfers from Arizona out to non-CAISO balancing areas. And then once the transfer limitation was implemented starting right now on July 26th, we do see it. We see no dynamic transfers from Arizona to CAISO. And while some of the transfers that were going from Arizona to CAISO are kind of replaced by transfers to non-CAISO balancing areas in WM, which is kind of this yellow, there is an overall reduced amount of kind of trade going from Arizona out to the rest of the West, caused by as a result of this transfer, the limitation of transfers in the CAISO BA in the hour and 15-minute markets. These graphs show a lot. So this again, the point of these graphs is to show, again, this is the same kind of information. This is a summary of the transfers between WIM balancing areas, and the circle on the left shows for the average of those transfers during for the interval just before the limitation was implemented for each day from July 26th to August 7th. The circle on the right shows the transfers between WIM balancing areas in the hour-end market for the interval just after that limitation was put in place. So by comparing these two, you can see that there was significant impact on the flows between WEIM areas due to this limitation put in place. But I think that probably the clearest way to describe the significant impacts that this transfer limitation did have on WIM is to look at prices. So this graph is showing the average 50-minute market price by component for Q3 2023. The blue line shows the average 15-minute market price in each balancing area. The blue bar is the system marginal energy price. It's going to be the same for each area. And the red bars shows the impact of WIM transfer constraint congestion on the price in each balancing area. So you can see from this in the 15-minute market that due to the limit, this limit of transfers into the CAISO balancing area contributed to significant congestion from the other balancing areas in the West into the CAISO balancing area, the load areas in the CAISO balancing area. So that congestion was driving down prices in the rest of the West compared to CAISO. We can talk about PowerX there as an outlier in a minute. So this should be compared now to this next graph, which is the average 5-minute market price by component for Q3 2023. Like I said before, this transfer limitation was only implemented during peak hours in the 15-minute market. It was not in place in the 5-minute market. And so when we get to the 5-minute market without that transfer limitation in place, you do not see that transfer congestion from other balancing areas in the West into CAISO. And in fact, what you get, especially during the peak hours, is that in the 15-minute market, right, like we talked about, prices in the CAISO BA were higher, significantly higher than the 5-minute market. But in other balancing areas, particularly in the Southwest, 5-minute prices actually ended up being higher than 15-minute market prices during peak hours. So, you know, the transfer limitation implemented by CAISO balancing area operators, it did create a significant discrepancy between the models used in the 15-minute market and the 5-minute market. And it did have a significant impact on the WEIM areas, all of WEIM. BEMIM has recommended that CAISO, work with stakeholders to consider if there may be, other methods, other ways to try to achieve the same, reliability outcomes that the CAISO BA was trying to achieve, but without potentially having this significant, creating the significant difference between the 15-minute market and 5-minute markets. And I think at the very least, it would be good to have a discussion, a more transparent discussion, again, about what the ISO is seeing in its systems that would lead them to do this again, and to be more transparent about when they are going to do this, and about when they may, and during what time periods they would implement this limitation, and then during time periods when they would not use this transfer limitation. Okay, with that, let's go to take some more questions.
Please go ahead.
Hi, Ryan. This is Robert Fisher with NV Energy. Can you go back to slide 15 for a second? Yeah. So I think this slide can be a bit misleading. A couple observations that I have in regards to this. If you look at July 20th, you can see that the transfers, while still below the hour ahead, are still trending in the right, similar direction, right? And as you previously showed, that the HASP bias or FMM bias during this time frame was also reduced on the 20th. However, the 25th and 26th looks dramatic in regards to the 5-minute transfers not showing up. But you also showed with the bias that there was a bias up to 5,000 megawatts. So that load difference, say Power 19, between the HASP and the RTD was 5,000 megawatts higher. And you're showing that 2,500 megawatts of those HASP transfers did not show up in RTD, which to me doesn't necessarily conclude that it's supporting those aspects. It just shows, possibly could show that because of that bias, those transfers were not needed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so I think so. I also have thoughts, and I think that that analysis leads to kind of recommendation to have more discussion with stakeholders about about the need for this limitation and considering alternatives.
Yeah, the implication is really that the transfers didn't show up, because if you think about, I mean, from a economic market perspective, the transfers are really an offer at those locations to sell, right? And so that could support an export. So the story really comes down to the resources not showing up was really the reason that operators decided to block the imports. And I have concerns around this because it's potentially locking out commitments, incremental commitments that are available in the EIM that could help support from a reliability perspective. So you are essentially leaving a lot of generation that's still left out in the EIM, but available for support. And so this graph has been used to show or defend the locking of the imports. And I think it could be a bit misleading. And I think a good data point that would be very helpful is, you know, there's some instances during this time frame where the transfers went away, and was also shown in the previous reports by CAISO. But there's no data that I have seen in regards to the frequency of that occurring. Like maybe this was an isolated incident where, you know, all the things just showed up at the wrong time. Does that happen often? Does it happen frequently? Or, and many of the circumstances I've seen from our side, we actually provide more than what we are asked to deliver. So I would be curious to see if there's some, you know, long-term investigation in regards to how frequent these transfers have been below what was expected, not just for this isolated incident. Is that something that your team is looking into?
I think, I mean, certainly we can do more analysis, and you know, we will be doing more analysis in the Q4 report that's upcoming. Okay. But I think our main point today is that this issue does warrant more discussion, more transparency, and more analysis.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yep. Yep. Looks like we have Danny with the question too.
This is Danny from APS. Can you hear me okay, sir?
I can hear you.
So to piggyback off of Robert Fisher, and we've had discussions about this topic quite a bit with the locking of the dynamic net imports into the ISO during this time frame. Back on the 20th and 25th, we also noticed some three large binding constraints out in the WEIM footprint. That combined to longer HASP runs, where we saw HASP runs take up to 22 to 23 minutes longer on the 20th, 21st, and then on the 25th. Just wondering, when we do that analysis, just want to be on record to say that we should also piggyback off of those binding constraints as far as the software optimization engine, taking in those factors, if that actually caused some of the issues with the longer HASP runs and those late cuts coming through to EIM entities. And then also, when we talked about a couple of slides further down the road, you talked about the difference in pricing, right, in the 15-minute market versus the 5-minute market, respectively. One of the things that I'd like to consider, again, this is going to sound odd coming from someone from Arizona, but when you look at the commitments that were probably most likely made during these timeframes, because you know this did go on till November 16th, it does look like there was higher commitments for more expensive units in the California area. So when we do that analysis, let's go ahead and look at it from the lens of a California ratepayer, if that was actually advantageous to not take the cheaper generation from the Southwest, as you know, they were most likely committing units in California that was more duly expensive in those RTPD runs during the 15-minute market runs. Just want to get that on record when we do that analysis. That's another lens to review it as. Right, appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Okay. You know what? I think we are past time. So I think with that, I don't see any other questions, but yeah, this would don't want to go into other people's other meetings. So thank you all very much for attending and asking all the great questions. And look forward to speaking with you all again when the next quarterly report comes out. Thank you.